Margaret Turner turned 78 last spring. 93. She remembered the exact moment she realized it. Standing alone in her small kitchen, holding a grocery store cake that felt heavier than it should have. The box said "Happy Birthday" in blue icing, cheerful in a way that felt almost cruel. She placed it on the table and stared at it for a long time before lighting the candles. 2 candles only, a 7 and an 8. She didn't like clutter anymore. She closed her eyes, leaned forward, and made the same wish she'd made for years now, not for more time, not for better health, just this. Please don't let today feel invisible. Margaret lived alone in a small yellow house on Maple Lane. It wasn't special. No one ever slowed down to look at it. The porch creaked when you stepped on the 3rd plank from the left. The paint on the window frames was peeling. The mailbox leaned slightly to one side, but it was home. It had been home for 46 years. Henry had chosen it because of the backyard. Big enough to breathe, he'd said. He always thought homes needed space to breathe, the same way people did. Henry had been gone for 9 years. 9 quiet, heavy years. Most mornings, Margaret woke before the sun. Not because she wanted to, her body just didn't sleep the way it used to. The house was always coldest at that hour. The silence thick enough to hear her own breathing. She shuffled into the kitchen, filled the kettle, and waited for the familiar whistle. That sound still felt like company. Tea in hand, she stepped outside and sat on the old oak bench in the backyard. Henry built that bench in 1982. She remembered the summer clearly. Daniel was still small, always running around with scraped knees and dirt on his jeans. Henry worked on the bench every evening after dinner, sanding the wood by hand, refusing help. "This one's special," he'd say. Margaret used to sit on the porch steps and watch him. Sometimes bring lemonade. Sometimes she'd just sit quietly, letting the evening settle around them. The bench sat beneath a tall maple tree now, facing the bird feeder Henry had hung one afternoon decades ago. The tree had grown tall and strong, its branches wide enough to shade half the yard. Margaret liked to watch the birds argue over seeds. Loud, impatient little creatures. They always came back. But lately, the bench felt too big. Margaret sat on one side, leaving the other empty, even though no one had asked her to. Old habits. Henry used to sit there with her in the evenings. Daniel too. Back when he still lived close enough to come home without planning weeks ahead. Now, Daniel lived 2 states away. He called once a month. "Hi, Mom. Just checking in. Work's been crazy. I'll visit soon. Always soon. Never now." Margaret never complained. She understood. Life moved fast. Young people were busy building lives. She told herself that was how it was supposed to be. Still, sometimes she whispered into the quiet air beside her, "I wish you'd come sit with me again. Just once." The phone rang early one Tuesday morning, 7:15 a.m. Margaret froze. No one called that early unless something was wrong. Mom. Daniel's voice sounded different, thinner, like it had lost something. I need to come home for a few days. Her heart tightened. What's wrong? She asked. There was a pause long enough to scare her. Laura and I. We're separating, he said quietly. The kids are with her. I don't know where else to go. Margaret sat down slowly, the chair scraping against the floor. Of course, she said. Come home. After the call ended, she sat there for a long time, staring at the wall. She wasn't sure if the tightness in her chest was worry or relief. Maybe both. Daniel arrived the next day just after lunch. His car pulled into the driveway slowly, as if unsure whether it belonged there anymore. 92. Margaret opened the door before he could knock. He looked older than 52. The lines around his mouth were deeper. His shoulders sagged in a way she didn't remember. She hugged him without saying a word. He smelled like road dust and exhaustion. They didn't talk much that first day. Daniel fixed things around the house that had needed attention for years. The loose porch step, a cabinet hinge, a flickering light. Margaret cooked his favorite meals, the ones she remembered without recipes. They ate in silence, comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from years of shared history. On the third night, after dinner, Daniel sat at the table longer than usual. I thought I was doing the right thing, he said finally. Working late, chasing promotions, providing. He stared into his coffee cup like it might answer him. I didn't notice when the distance started, he continued. By the time I did, it was already normal. Margaret listened. She always had. The kids barely know me, he said. Emily thinks I don't care. Thomas thinks I'm disappointed in him. Margaret felt something ache deep inside her chest. She'd heard this story not from Daniel, but from life before itself. I don't know how to fix it, he said. Margaret stood slowly. Come with me tomorrow morning, she said. Early. They walked into the backyard before sunrise. The air was crisp, the sky soft and pale. Margaret led him to the oak bench. This bench, she said, resting her hand on the wood. Your father made it so we'd always have somewhere to sit together. When the house got quiet, Daniel stayed silent. I sit here every morning, she continued. Sometimes I talk to your father. Sometimes I talk to you, even when you're far away. Daniel swallowed hard. There's still time, Margaret said gently. Not all the time in the world, but enough. He reached for her hand. I'm sorry, Mom. She squeezed back. I know. That afternoon, Daniel made 2 phone calls he'd been avoiding. He didn't explain. He didn't apologize. He invited. 92. Emily came first, then Thomas. The house filled with noise again, laughter, footsteps, voices overlapping. Margaret stood in the doorway, watching, her eyes misty. Sunday morning, everyone gathered in the backyard. The bench was crowded, uncomfortable. Perfect. Margaret pointed to the maple tree. Your grandfather planted that when Daniel was born, she said. It grew slowly, strong. No one rushed. No one checked their phones. They just sat together. Daniel stayed another week. When he left, Daniel hugged his mother longer than usual. I'll be back, he said softly, not as a promise out of habit, but one he truly meant. Margaret stood in the doorway and watched his car disappear down Maple Lane. She didn't feel the familiar ache this time. Instead, there was something warm in her chest, something peaceful. She walked slowly into the backyard and sat on the old oak bench beneath the maple tree. The morning air was gentle. The birds returned to the feeder, noisy and impatient, just as they always had. Margaret closed her eyes and breathed deeply. It's never too late, she whispered. And for the first time in many years, the bench didn't feel empty. Thank you for listening. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us what truly matters.